Well, welcome back everyone to our very first session of the afternoon. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce you to our guest speaker here today, Dr. Alexandre Amato. He has with him over 40 years of experience in the built environment and has worked in both the private and public sectors in the UK, the Southeast Asia, and now in the Middle East. Now, since 1996, his research has largely focused on the application of life cycle assessment, quantitatively assessing the environmental impact of buildings, construction systems, and products. In Qatar, he has spent the first 3 years providing sustainable consultancy within Davis Langdon, and for the last 8 years, he has held the position of the head of research at the Qatar Green Building Council, which is part of the Qatar Foundation. Here, he has helped deliver an expanding research and education program, and he is part of the team that has recently been awarded the largest cluster research project to be funded by the Qatar National Research Fund. The project will examine the development of direct atmospheric carbon capture around existing building air conditioning systems as well. Today, he will be presenting a paper on the mitigation and adaptation, the role of Qatar's building and infrastructure stock in climate change. So viewers, please note to use the chat box to drop in your questions during the course of the presentation so that Dr. Alex can address them towards the end. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mega. Okay. Can everybody see the presentation? Okay. Today, I'd like to concentrate perhaps on two areas which are sometimes neglected. Adaptation, there's a great deal of focus with COP26 coming along later this year, or next month in fact. And we must always remember that within the Paris Agreement, there is both emphasis on mitigation and adaptation. And the other area I want to look at is the existing building stock, because that is likely to be transformed in the future. And what I would like to outline are these four drivers of change that affect the built environment in Qatar and will continue to affect with increasing force, and I think lead to a great deal of change, especially in the residential stock. First of all, there's a requirement for mitigation of national CO2 emissions. This is Qatar's emissions, in line with other nations committed to the Paris Agreement for the nationally determined contributions. And we'll look a little bit more into that in the next few slides. Accepting that climate change is inevitable, there will be pressures on the existing built environment to adapt to these, and in particular to the climate change that will affect the Gulf in particular. There's also within the National Development Strategy in Qatar a great deal of interest in food security, and what I do believe is that there will be a much more interest in the development of urban food production. And this will be in line with other countries in hot, arid climatic zones. And last of all, again, in line with the National Development Strategy, is the development of a mature, diversified, but non-hydrocarbon economy. And that is particularly important to Qatar's future. If we take a closer look to Qatar's nationally determined contribution, and this was published just this August, in preparation for COP26. The current communication reflects an enhanced ambition by the state of Qatar towards reducing its overall emissions in response to the guidance set forth in the Paris Agreement. And here, for the first time, we actually do have a commitment in terms of percentage, a numerical reduction that can be quantified. So it's a 25% emission of greenhouse gases by 2030 relative to a baseline scenario, business as usual, which is taken at 2019. If we delve further into the document, there is considerable concern about the effects of climate change actually upon Qatar as a country. And it says, given its location, Qatar is likely to suffer from severe consequences of global warming. Under the major impact of climate change, Qatar is extremely vulnerable to rising sea levels and air temperature increases, leading to inland flooding, heat exhaustions of its population. At the moment, sea level rise appears to be the most concerning as far as government is concerned. And I would like to just take this slide to consider sea level rise. Having carried out ourselves recent studies, assuming the very worst case scenarios, show that Qatar may experience 1.2 to 1.9 meter sea level rise by the end of the century. And I stress that this is the very worst case scenarios. Logical adaptive policies relating to areas that could be affected by SLR and storm surges should prevent any new development within these areas. So the areas are identified, no development within those zones. Instigate a program of natural sea defences like mangroves. Progressive withdrawal from those areas that have already been developed and rewilding, again with natural sea defences. And in the last instance, construct physical sea level defences to protect essential infrastructure, historic and valuable urban areas. And it's also important to point out that this sea level rise will be gradual but constant through as we progress to the end of the century. Most of Qatar's building stock is residential. Those are the greatest areas taken up. And a great many of those will actually escape the effects of sea level rise. Here you can see I've plotted on here a 1.9 meter sea level rise. The key question though is not so much sea level rise. And my conclusion is that the risk of sea level rise can be effectively managed in Qatar. Much more concerning are the predicted effects of extreme weather events, flash floods, extreme winds, and those of us, I think, can remember the floods of a few years ago that occurred with the torrential downpour. Perhaps the most concerning is extreme temperatures, because these actually do lead to considerable morbidity and mortality when they occur. And in this region, we can expect temperatures greater than the average increases in global temperature that is predicted by the IPCC. Both of these exacerbate poor outdoor air conditions. A lot of dust particles are entrained, and this can lead to very poor indoor air quality, which in itself leads to considerable respiratory problems and morbidity and mortality. So these are the greater concerns that I particularly have, that really our existing building stock will have to prepare. In these circumstances, the home becomes a refuge. And this is actually common policy in other areas within the world, especially those that are affected by typhoon. And having lived many years in Hong Kong, I can remember that when the typhoon warning is posted, everybody must return home, and your home, even if it's 40 stories in the air, becomes your refuge. My question, and this is a key question of this presentation, is Qatar's building stock fit for this purpose? And there I think that there is a question mark. If we look back to the mitigation question, certainly Qatar, like many other countries, will need to ensure that its existing building stock is reduces its energy consumption. This is extremely important. We must have energy conservation, and that affects the demand side rather than the supply side for energy. And we've introduced in Qatar building regulations, and they can increase performance based or prescriptive. We've introduced energy performance certificates and voluntary sustainable schemes like LEED and GSAS in the state of Qatar have been implemented. So we might say, well, what is the problem? The problem is not new build. The problem is the existing building stock. As I've pointed out, this is the area that will need to be reformed in the future. If we look at the energy consumption that we probably are experiencing in Qatar at the moment, and we look at the energy performance actually of adopting passive house standards, all of this has been understood for perhaps something like 20, even 30 years. The effect of insulation, the effect of controlled ventilation for energy recovery, cooling, etc., reducing solar heat gain, more efficient appliances, use of LED lighting, the use of fabric energy storage, etc. All of this is well understood, but all of this requires an investment in the existing building stock. How do we actually initiate that investment is a key question. One of the key aims of Qatar's current development also is the growth and diversity of the non-hydrocarbon economy. Investment in developing a truly modern construction sector would achieve this aim and would lead to a much more resilient building and infrastructure stock that would also be much more sustainable. And that, I think, is the aim that should be set. I think it can be rolled out, but it does need government consultation with the private sector, and it does need an overall plan, which at the moment isn't there. Going on, some thoughts about the impact of the of diversification and developing this area leads inevitably to diversification of that non-hydrocarbon economy. Capacity barriers for government and industry professionals overcome through high-level training, industry capacity, sustainability skills overcome through tertiary vocational education and training. All of this, new jobs, supply chain sources, new sustainable materials, etc., new industry consortia, working with government, all of this means new jobs. And therefore, I think that investment in this area can actually tick all of those 4 boxes that I started off with, all those drivers that are affecting the industry and the built environment. So what might a vision of sustainable and resilient neighborhood, what might it be? People living in well-designed, high-quality homes that protect them from extreme heat, poor outdoor air quality, and from extreme weather events, a refuge. Neighbourhoods with large amounts of connected green spaces, a lot of shading, and areas devoted to urban agriculture. An emphasis on pedestrianisation, on making or encouraging people to walk or cycle rather than compete with motorcycles. And here we can take, if you like, our lessons from various schemes around the world. One in Barcelona, where areas are designated with just cycling and delivery vehicles. And that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? I don't think so. So that is, I believe, if you like, the four drivers, essential drivers that will affect the development of Qatar's building stock, and in particular its residential neighbourhoods, which I do believe will be transformed into truly resilient and sustainable neighbourhoods. It requires, I think, partnership between government and the private sector. Thank you.